What is God? Welcome to Philosopher's Corner. I'm John. What is God? The standard definition is the creator of the universe, an omniscient being who rules over all creation, a male deity. That about sums it up. What is God philosophically? Philosophically, God is everything. God is life. God is the summation of everything. God is the source of all creation. When we backwards engineer and we go back in the chains of causation all the way back to the first causation, and we do that for every single phenomenon in existence, for every piece of creation, if we follow them all backwards through causation to the first cause, we can rightly say that God is the first cause. And in that first cause, the first cause existed in the void. The first cause existed in the void and caused what we call life to come into existence. And everything that we explore philosophically is necessarily a subset of God. That includes everything. So the first cause existing in the void, expanding, allowing for life to live within its limits, being the thing that we call life, being interactive and reflexive as we put our consciousness on it and interact with it, and in fact finding out that we are part of it and can never actually be separate of it, and the exploration and the search ultimately coming back and showing us that there is no separation between us and the energy that makes up life, and then going further down the road and finding out that there's no separation between the thing we call life or creation and God. Now, traditionally in philosophy, this presented a conundrum for many thinkers, because they would say, well, you can have one or two views of God. You can view it that it's that, what I just described, that it's everything, that we live in it, we're part of it, and we are it, and that furthermore, we can grow our knowledge of self by acknowledging it, and that we can become more of a co-creator in the participant of life through knowledge and awareness and growth of this knowledge that the God energy is in us. But they would get to a point where then they would say, well, how do you rectify that with, we have this idea that there's an embodied God, that there's this figure sitting on a throne somewhere in the universe, like Zeus, ruling over things. And so there's two ways, there's a couple ways philosophically to approach that. One, with the advent of quantum mechanics and quantum physics, we now have a scientific explanation for the fact that energy can be in two places at once. It can be in separate states simultaneously. And now we know that things can be embodied and pantheistic. They can be embodied and diffused simultaneously. Now, that's no answer as to whether or not there's an embodied God. That's not. But it provides the philosophical and intellectual framework for the possibility that God is not only all of the creation, but can simultaneously be in approachable form of some makeup. That's physics says that's possible. That there's some conscious representation of the whole system of life. And in a way, it may be easier philosophically and have less religious baggage to really think of God as the system of systems. A lot of more esoteric areas of thought, they really kind of boil down God to being the initial energy that propagated itself into the void. And they say that that's what the flower of life is a sacred geometric blueprint for. That initially God gave birth to itself in the void and was essentially a sphere of light. And that sphere of light is represented in 2D drawings by the circles found in the circle of life. And that those circles and spheres began to propagate in every direction in 360 degrees throughout all of the void. And so in that sense, God was quantum superimposing itself with each infinite and eternal replication. Because if the mandate for initial propagation was to keep the eternal and infinite miracle occurring, the flower of life is the blueprint that has that intention. And it has that design. So many esoteric schools of thought believe that some version of that is the initial blueprint for the propagation of God, which then ends up being, wherever the expansion of God occurs, ends up being the defining limits for creation and thus life that we're living within it. And once again, we're back to the idea that anything that we study in philosophy is a subset of God. Now, in terms of what are like the practical applications of God, well, they're infinite, they're eternal. In previous video, I discussed infinite intelligence, and now infinite intelligence is a byproduct, and it is also God. Infinite intelligence being life and the ability to access it on the level of consciousness. So in terms of breaking down reality, once we know that everything is a subset of God, then we know that we can break down life to all the different layers of God that matter. And all these different forms of study and all of these different phenomenon do have a connective thread, because as we talked about in previous videos, time and space, time is a description of the motion of the initial energy through the void and the sequential energy motions through the void. Space is the limit of the expansion of the Godhead through the void within which life can exist. And the study of anything in there, in the attempt to connect it in a broader sense, is philosophy. Trying to describe any of the phenomenon, any of the trends, any of the general threads and trends becomes philosophy. That being said, when we see that time and space are derivatives of the expansion of the Godhead in the void, then we can see that time and space are an illusion. And we can also get a sense that time and space are also God. And that all of the higher level effects of the expansion of the life-giving energy that allows for the full spectrum of life to exist in the void is in fact God. And that anything that we are able to access in this particular realm, this material realm that we're in a human body, is either a derivative or essentially a shadow from a higher dimension of the effects of the impetus of this life energy that is expanding through the void. In fact, the limits of this creation are what we would refer to as the universe. And in that way, when a person is referring to the universe, they are also referring to God, because when we can zoom out from the entire universe, if we can zoom out from all of creation to just on the other side of the void and look into creation, we can see that creation itself is one unified consciousness. And that one unified consciousness is what we're referring to when we refer to God. That is also what we're referring to in the infinite intelligence when we tap into that. That being said, the summation of all consciousness from beginning to end within the void, being called God, means that it has all the power of life constantly connected to itself with infinite and eternal synergy, infinite and eternal wisdom, infinite and eternal energy, infinite and eternal consciousness. Every single consciousness that has ever existed or will ever exist is part of this fountainhead of infinite and eternal consciousness that exists in the void. Excuse me. So that's the macro of God, philosophically, and everything is involved in it as it puts on this production of life. And now to swing it back the other way, is there an embodiable, approachable version of this consciousness? Which is another thing that's in the air when we talk about God, because we're humans and we like to think that like can we bring it down to scale? And philosophically, that's always been the question for prophets, messiahs, mystics, saviors, sages, all these people, is can the human experience replicate in the micro what God has as the creative force produced in the macro? That's certainly the answer that Jesus, Yeshua, gives in the Christian tradition. They have come to the determination that Jesus Christ is the embodiment of that consciousness. And in his capacity as a spiritual teacher, he has furthermore told humans on earth that it is an achievable state, and furthermore that it is a state that is intended by God, the Creator, for humans to experience in the human condition. And he lays out paths in order to attempt to achieve the embodiment of that consciousness within the human experience, within one human life. Now, other prophets have also laid out a path that they say can bring you to essentially God consciousness. And that seems to be one of the chief aims of the human experience. And it seems to be rather autonomic. So the topic obviously comes up a lot. Now, is there one embodied consciousness of God? We don't have that at our fingertips. There isn't one presently that we're aware of. People seem to agree that the consciousness is just it is what it is, that it's all around us, and it's just vast, and that we're in the subset of life, and that's that. However, if we're not looking for it in human form, the next question philosophically is, well, can it be embodied? Can it just be in a finite form? Philosophically, I think that if we use our ability to sort of backwards engineer through the links of cause and effect back to source, and you can do this from any piece of phenomenon in the reality. Keep that in mind. When I'm saying that everything is a subset of God, that necessarily infers that you can look at anything in the reality, literally anything, any material item, any concept, any idea, any piece of energy, and if you look deeply into it, if you look into it deeply enough, and if you follow it back through all of its chains of causation, like what caused this one link, what caused this another link, what caused this another link. If you do that ad infinitum, you do it as long as you can through time and space to get back to source, anything you do that for will lead back to God. Because God is the inception point of life. It's the inception point of creation. It's the propagating force of life. And when you have all of those phenomenon linked back to source, and we know that we live in a vibratory environment, a vibratory world composed of wavelengths and energies, and we go back, we can start to see that when we get there, there's a universal frequency to every item in existence at its core. Because at its core, everything was born from the same energy and has matriculated from some higher level electroplasmatic, static energy field. Whereas there's the void, which is it's the void. It has nothing in it. It's no concepts, no nothing, no life. We don't even know, no space, no time. It's very difficult to wrap the human mind around because our mind was designed to process creation. So to try to process anti-creation it's actually damaging for the human mind to really be in there too long. And then to flip it back into creation, where we can have understanding of creation and how it propagates and how it's cause and effect based, and how we can go backwards and forwards in causation to learn things. And then we can start to appreciate the vibrancy of the gift of our existence and of knowledge of what we're in, which ultimately is, I think that's the ultimate aim of philosophy. The ultimate aim of philosophy is to answer the question, like, what are we in? Why are we here? What's going on? And by going back through the chain of causation, back to source from any point, and I think it's important as a philosopher to do it from multiple points, so that a philosopher, so that one can see the truth of it, that it's true no matter where you take it from, from any radiating area, from any distance. It doesn't matter. You can always go back to it. And when a person is satisfied with that and they understand that's really what's comprising the universal frequency, the Buddhists will say, it's the Om, is the sound of the universe. Om, it's the sound of the universe humming. That's the universal frequency made audible. Then at that point, it doesn't, the other questions have either been satisfied, or the philosopher knows that the main questions have been satisfactorily answered, and the other questions that have been left unanswered have answers. It's just a matter of, do you want to spend your time getting to those answers? Now that you can understand that all roads lead back to God, the source head, universal frequency, prime mover, first origin, first source, whatever you want to call it. Whatever level that you want to address it on. And that we are not separate from it. And that as we have this experience of life that it has provided for us with intention, we can feel safe and loved, knowing that we're in the comfort of life and that we exist and that we have life, as opposed to being in the void and like not having life and not even existing. And that is the true gift, and that is the true source of our life, each of our lives. And when we look in ourselves and we backtrack ourselves, we take our considerable philosophical powers and we do it for ourselves, and we look into ourselves and we see that we have a piece of energy from initial creation inside of us, wrapped underneath our soul. Our soul's wrapped around it, and we penetrate to it and find it. In that journey, all of the answers will be made manifest. And then completion can occur, and the circle can be completed, and we have sort of gone back to our spawning ground, and we can move forward in life with knowledge, with gnosis. Well, I hope you found this helpful. Thanks for spending some time here at Philosopher's Corner. Have fun, and may God be with you.